The Belmont Grand Ballroom sparkled with the kind of understated elegance that only serious money could buy. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables laden with imported flowers, each centerpiece costing more than most people's grocery budgets. Mom's 60th birthday celebration had drawn nearly 200 guests, all dressed in their finest attire to honor the woman who'd spent 4 decades building her reputation as one of the city's premier social hostesses. I sat at the family table wearing my usual simple black dress from Target, watching the well-choreographed performance of wealth and social standing unfold around me. Dad commanded attention in his custom Armani suit, making rounds to greet business associates and political connections. Mom held court in her designer gown, accepting congratulations and gifts from friends who treated social climbing like an Olympic sport. My sister Amanda sparkled at the head table in jewelry that could fund a small business, her husband Robert nodding along as she regaled nearby guests with stories from their recent Mediterranean cruise. My brother David worked the room with practiced ease, his wife Catherine hanging on his arm like a perfectly coordinated accessory, both of them radiating the confidence that came from never having worried about money. Meanwhile, I quietly ate my slice of the $800 custom birthday cake, invisible to everyone except when they needed someone to look down on for comparison. Jessica. Dad's voice boomed across the ballroom as the main course was cleared. Come over here, I want everyone to meet my children. I walked over with my water glass, knowing exactly what was coming. This was Dad's favorite party performance, introducing his successful children to important people, then using me as the cautionary tale about wasted potential. Everyone, Dad announced to the circle of influential business leaders and their spouses, these are my pride and joy. Amanda here is married to Dr. Robert Sterling, the cardiac surgeon who's been featured in Medical Today 3 times this year. Amanda beamed and accepted the congratulations gracefully. And David is a partner at Morrison Blake & Associates, just made the youngest senior partner in the firm's history. David shook hands and exchanged business cards with obvious satisfaction. And this, Dad's voice took on a different tone as he gestured toward me, is Jessica. She's still figuring things out. The circle of successful people smiled politely, the kind of expressions people wear when they're about to witness someone else's mild humiliation for entertainment. What do you do, Jessica? Asked Margaret Holloway, wife of the mayor and one of Mom's closest friends. I work in technology, I said simply. Technology, Dad repeated with a slight chuckle. She means she does some kind of computer work from her apartment. Nobody's quite sure what exactly. It's freelance consulting, I clarified. Freelance, Amanda said with sisterly concern. Which is code for unemployed but too proud to admit it. The circle chuckled politely at her joke. The thing is, Dad continued, warming to his favorite theme, Jessica had every advantage growing up. Top schools, family connections, opportunities that most people would kill for. But some people just don't have the drive to build something meaningful. It's actually quite sad, David added. She's 32 years old and still living like a college student. No career track, no serious relationships, no assets to speak of. Meanwhile, Amanda and I have built real lives, real success stories. Mrs. Holloway nodded sympathetically. Well, not everyone is cut out for traditional success. Some people march to their own drummer. That's a charitable way to put it, Catherine said. But at some point, marching to your own drummer just becomes refusing to grow up. I took a sip of water and listened to them discuss my various shortcomings with the clinical detachment of people analyzing a particularly interesting failure. No ambition, no focus, no understanding of how the real world worked. The usual list. The worst part, Dad said, his voice taking on a theatrical sadness, is watching someone with so much potential just waste it. I built a successful investment firm from nothing. Mom created one of the most respected charitable foundations in the state. Amanda married brilliantly, David became the youngest senior partner in his firm's history. And Jessica. He gestured vaguely at my existence. Spends her days on a laptop in her apartment doing God knows what for God knows who. It's embarrassing, frankly. The conversation moved on to other topics. Upcoming charity galas, vacation plans to Europe, investment strategies that were performing well in the current market. Standard wealthy person talk that I'd grown up hearing but had supposedly never learned to participate in. My phone sat silently on the table, occasionally buzzing with notifications that I ignored. Board meeting confirmations, acquisition approvals, SEC filing updates. The usual business of running a multi-billion-dollar technology empire, though they didn't need to know any of that. You know what the real tragedy is? Mom's voice cut through the conversation as she approached our circle. The guest of honor had decided to join in on the evening's entertainment. The real tragedy, she continued, is that we raced Jessica with every advantage, every opportunity, and she chose to become this. She made the same vague gesture Dad had used earlier. Mom, I said quietly, maybe we shouldn't. Shouldn't what? She interrupted. Shouldn't acknowledge reality? Jessica, you're 32 years old. Look around this room. Look at the people who've come to celebrate with me tonight. Business leaders, philanthropists, community builders. People who've made something of themselves. The entire circle was watching now, along with several nearby tables who'd been drawn in by Mom's rising voice. And then look at yourself, she continued. No career, no family, no accomplishments anyone can point to with pride. You're the family disappointment, and it's time someone said it out loud. The silence that followed was uncomfortable even by the standards of wealthy family drama. Several people shifted nervously, unsure whether they were supposed to defend me or pile on. Dad stepped into the silence with the confidence of someone delivering a prepared speech. Margaret's right, he said, addressing not just our circle but the growing audience of nearby tables. Jessica represents everything we tried not to raise our children to become. Aimless, unproductive, living off the family name without contributing anything meaningful to society. A 32-year-old nobody, Mom added with finality. The room had gone remarkably quiet now, with most of the ballroom's attention focused on our little family drama. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me, waiting to see how I'd respond to being publicly declared the family failure at my mother's milestone birthday celebration. I took another sip of water and was about to respond when my phone rang. Loudly. I'd forgotten to switch it to silent mode, and the ringtone echoed across the suddenly quiet ballroom. The caller ID showed Forbes magazine editorial. Jessica, Dad hissed, turn that off. This is completely inappropriate. But something made me hesitate. Forbes didn't call people at 8:30 p.m. on Saturday nights unless something significant had happened. My finger hovered over the decline button for just a moment too long. Answer it, someone from the audience called out. Let's see what kind of important business call the family disappointment gets. A ripple of laughter went through the crowd. Fine, I said and answered the phone on speaker. Jessica Chin? The professional voice filled the suddenly silent ballroom. Yes, this is Jessica. This is Michael Rodriguez from Forbes magazine. I'm calling to personally congratulate you on making this year's youngest billionaire list. Your company, Quantum Dynamics, had the most impressive valuation growth we've seen in the technology sector. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the kitchen staff preparing desserts 3 rooms away. I'm sorry, the Forbes journalist continued. I know it's late, but our editorial team wanted to reach out immediately. The story goes live at midnight, and we're hoping to get a quote about your reaction to being named the youngest self-made billionaire in America under 35. Dad's champagne glass slipped from his suddenly unsteady hand and shattered on the marble floor. Quantum Dynamics, Mom whispered as if testing whether the words made sense when she said them out loud. Miss Chin, the journalist continued. Are you there? We're particularly interested in your perspective on building a $7 billion AI company in just 4 years, starting from your apartment. $7 billion. The number hung in the air like expensive perfume. I'm here, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the ballroom that had gone silent except for the sound of broken glass being swept up. I'm actually at a family event right now. Oh, perfect. Family celebration for your Forbes recognition? That's a great angle for the story. I looked around at the circle of stunned faces, Dad with his mouth hanging open, Mom clutching her pearls like they might anchor her to reality, Amanda and David staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Something like that, I said. You mentioned the valuation at $7 billion? $7.2 billion as of Friday's closing. Your AI platform's integration with healthcare systems globally has exceeded every projection. The IPO announcement alone added $2 billion to the company's worth. Margaret Holloway made a small choking sound. And the personal net worth calculation? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Based on your majority stake in quantum dynamics plus your other technology investments, we're showing your personal wealth at approximately $4.3 billion. You're not just the youngest billionaire on our list, Ms. Chin, you're in the top 15 richest self-made women in America. The ballroom was so quiet I could hear people breathing. I appreciate the recognition, I said. Can we schedule a formal interview for Monday? I'd like to give this the attention it deserves. Absolutely. One more quick question for tonight's deadline. What would you say to young entrepreneurs who look up to your success story? I looked around the circle of family and friends who had spent the evening explaining my failures and limitations. I'd say that success isn't about meeting other people's expectations, I said. It's about building something meaningful, even when the people closest to you can't see the value in what you're creating. Excellent quote. We'll be in touch Monday for the full feature. Congratulations again, Ms. Chin. I hung up the phone and looked around at the 200 guests who had been witness to the most dramatic reversal in Belmont Grand Ballroom history. $4.3 billion, David said slowly, as if testing whether the words would make sense if he said them out loud. Personal net worth, I confirmed. The company valuation is separate. Dad found his voice first, though it came out shaky and higher than usual. Jessica, what the hell is quantum dynamics? My company. I started it 4 years ago in that apartment you keep making fun of. Your company? Amanda's voice cracked slightly. You own a $7 billion company? 71% ownership stake. The other 29% is held by early investors and employees. Mom sat down heavily in the nearest chair. The computer work you do from your apartment is running one of the fastest-growing AI companies in the world, I finished. We develop artificial intelligence platforms for healthcare, financial services, and logistics. Currently deployed in 43 countries. The crowd was starting to murmur now, whispered conversations spreading through the ballroom as people processed what they'd just witnessed. But you dress like... Catherine started, then stopped. Like someone who doesn't need to prove anything to anyone through clothing? I suggested. Yeah, I found that building revolutionary technology is more important than impressing people at parties. Robert, Amanda's surgeon husband, stepped forward with a look of dawning recognition. Jessica, the new surgical AI system we've been beta testing at the hospital, the one that's reduced complications by 60%, that's your technology? Quantum Medical is one of our subsidiaries, yes. That system has saved over 300 lives since we started using it 6 months ago, he said, his voice filled with awe. The diagnostic accuracy is unprecedented. That's the point, I said. Technology should solve real problems, not just make money. Dad cleared his throat, his business instincts finally kicking in despite the shock. Jessica, this is incredible news. We should celebrate. We should discuss family investment opportunities, maybe some strategic partnerships. I laughed, a sound that seemed to surprise everyone in the ballroom. Dad, Quantum Dynamics raised its last funding round at a $7 billion valuation. We're not looking for investors. We're preparing for an IPO that will likely push the company's worth above $15 billion. But we're family, Mom said, her voice taking on a desperate edge I'd never heard before. Family supports each other. We can help with connections, board positions, strategic advice. Like you've been supporting me for the past 4 years? I asked. By calling me a disappointment? By telling everyone I'm a 32-year-old nobody who's wasted every opportunity? The ballroom had gone quiet again, everyone straining to hear our family drama play out. We didn't know, Amanda protested. If we'd known you were successful, you would have treated me differently, I interrupted. That's exactly the problem. Your respect was conditional on my success meeting your definition of what mattered. My phone buzzed with a text from my assistant. Wall Street Journal wants comment on Forbes story. CNBC requesting interview. Stock futures jumping on IPO speculation. The car service is here, I announced, though that wasn't what the text said. I should head home. Early morning tomorrow. Jessica, wait, Dad called as I turned to leave. We need to talk about this as a family. I paused and looked back at the 200 guests who had witnessed the evening's events. We did talk about it, I said. For 4 years. You told me I was aimless, unproductive, and embarrassing to the family. You made your feelings very clear. But things are different now, Mom said desperately. You're right, I agreed. Now you know exactly who you were talking to all along. As I walked toward the ballroom exit, I could hear the explosion of conversation behind me. Whispered speculation, frantic attempts to process what had just happened, probably mixed with calculations about how this changed their relationships with me. The valet brought my Honda Civic to the front entrance. The same car they'd been making jokes about for years, though it had served me perfectly well through the early days of building quantum dynamics. My phone rang as I drove home through the quiet city streets. Jessica. I just heard. My business partner Alex's excited voice filled the car. Forbes called me for confirmation on the numbers. How does it feel to be officially a billionaire? Like validation I didn't know I needed, I said honestly. And the family reaction? Exactly what you'd expect. Sudden interest in supporting my success after years of calling me a disappointment. Speaking of support, Alex said, your parents' investment firm called our office today. Something about exploring family synergies with quantum dynamics. I laughed as I pulled into my apartment building's parking garage. Let me guess, they want to discuss strategic partnerships? And board positions? And equity stakes? Apparently being related to you makes them qualified to advise a $7 billion AI company. Tell them I'm still figuring things out, I said. They'll understand what that means. Tomorrow, when the Forbes story went live, when the stock market opened with speculation about Quantum Dynamics IPO, when my family's friends started asking questions about their disappointing daughter, things would be different. Not because I'd finally proven myself worthy of their respect, but because they'd finally proven themselves unworthy of mine. Quantum Dynamics had bigger innovations planned, better technology and development, and more ways to change the world ahead. And for the first time in 4 years, I wouldn't have to explain any of it to people who had already decided I wasn't worth listening to.